Hey, welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast. My name is Luke and I host this with my buddy Matt Ma. And our goal is to empower you to discover how your faith impacts culture for God's kingdom. To do that, we're sitting down with different men and women from all kinds of disciplines to uncover how they, through their ambitions and vocational skill set, make a difference in the lives of those around them. And so if this is helpful to you, we'd love it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy today's episode. Well, hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for our conversation on the Kingdoms Podcast. We're super grateful to have Joanna la Fleur with us. Joanna, thank you for making the time to jump on today.
I'm so pumped to be here. This is going to be fun.
Well, we're pumped to have you. I know you and I have had the chance to interact a little bit before sitting down for this interview together, but you do some amazing work in the media world, TV shows, podcasting, coming alongside churches and nonprofits and other organizations to really enhance and expand their communications work. So I know I'm going to learn a lot from you today. I know our listeners are going to learn a lot from you. And well, as I mentioned a minute ago, this is your sweet spot: communication strategies, digital media, creative projects, wanting to say to churches, wanting to say to nonprofits around the world, how can we maximize your message, expand your platform, help you to do what you feel called to do in the world? But that didn't just happen overnight. So could you give us maybe a snapshot of the journey that took you to that point, some of the key experiences or moments of like, wow, this is what I'm made to do, that led you into the vocation you're in today?
Yeah. The story I usually tell, context of grew up in a Christian family where parents really lived faith in front of me. So I don't have like a moment where I became a Christian. It was sort of I feel like I've known Jesus my whole life, and we just got to know each other. You have moments of decisions, I suppose, but I've just gotten to know him my whole life and seen what he does through, at the beginning through the work of my family. And we lived abroad. We lived in Romania as a kid. I studied in France as well at a business school. So even just spent some time in Thailand, which I know you have a connection to. So just seeing some global context, and then even I bring that into this conversation because I think in what I do, I try to come with a more global perspective. I really love learning about what is the church around the world doing. For example, what is the church? I'll answer your question in a sec, but on my digression, I'm already digressing. But what is the church in India doing? We got a country of over 1 billion people. Yeah. So there are lots of Christians there, but there's lots of challenges there, and there's lots of, huge wealth, gap between people. And so how is the church mobilizing and discipling there? And so those are the kinds of people I like to talk to. The side note on that is WhatsApp is the tool that the church is using in India to reach people, evangelize, discipleship, build groups and relationships. Anyways, but I was working in a tech company coming out of my undergrad in business and communications with a church and ministry background in my family. I was working in a tech job doing marketing and PR, and it doesn't really matter what the product did, but what the product looked like was a big black metal box. There was technology inside that would be helping a company read what's going on the internet. And so the graphic designer pulls me over to his desk one day, and he's got this main product up on the computer screen in Photoshop. He's playing with effects, black and white and color and lighting and whatever. And he asks me, he's asking my opinion. Do you like this? Or how about this? What if I do this? And he's changing it a bit. And then he finally says to me, Joanna, what can I do to make this look sexy? I'm like, there's nothing you can do to make this look sexy. It's a big black box. It's not gonna happen. And I felt like, though, in that moment, in that cubicle, really like the Lord spoke to me very loudly in my spirit, saying like, what are you doing? You don't care about the big black box. You know that you're supposed to use your skills, these skills, for the church. What are you doing? And so it was nothing like the big black box wasn't immoral or sinful. There's nothing wrong with working on big black boxes. But for me, I really felt a sense of calling at that point to use my skills, media, communications, technology, all that stuff. I wanted to use it for the church. but I didn't know how to do that. I also, even just as a woman, I wasn't sure what that could look like. I had lots of questions.
Yeah.
And very soon after, the church I was attending at the time in Waterloo, Ontario, they asked me to come on staff part-time. And it was something I didn't pursue. I gave them all kinds of reasons why that seemed like a bad idea. They took me on anyways. I worked there for a few years part-time and was able to be half in the church world and then half in still like the tech. I was working in tech and environmental, like helping tech companies become more environmentally sustainable, and was working in a few other ways like that. So doing PR and marketing and church at the same time before diving full time into church work at a few years later back in the Toronto area. And yeah, from there, the church I entered didn't even have a communications department of any kind. And then we built it from, like, I remember this is now 2010, and we were, I don't know how old you guys are, so I'm dating myself here, but 2010, we didn't have like an Instagram, a Facebook. I remember we made those accounts for the church. And I can picture like opening those things and making decisions about like what the bio was going to say and all that kind of stuff. And so what became maybe as an encouragement for people who are interested in this, we started doing it as like a side project, which turned into a valid, like an affirmed piece of my job. And then it turned into part half-time, and then it turned into full-time, and then it turned into an entire department. So I didn't get hired from this church for this job in communications, but it was a huge need and it was something I could do. So I began taking it on. And a lot of churches don't have a communications person, and maybe we'll never be able to afford one, or not a full-time one. But I think if we can do things even on the side, we start to prove its value. And then I think churches begin to make some financial decisions about funding that area if it seems like something valuable. So if people are looking for a job in this, sometimes they have to make their own. So from there, over the years, I carried on in that job. I was there 9 years till 2019, and was started to do more and more work on the side. While I was there, I got a master's in theology and wanted to kind of ground. I was like, okay, if I'm going to be in the church, I probably should have some theology, because I had a business, more of like a business background. So I got the theology. Yeah, I got that theology degree along the way, and more and more churches or ministries, churches, charities were asking for help, kind of like a side project. And then I started a podcast as a side project, and I was invited to co-host a TV show. And these were all like side projects. And as you can imagine, that became too much. So I felt like I needed to make a decision about what to do. And I mean, ultimately, after 9 years in my role, I felt like I'd really done what I had come to do, and was time to take on a new challenge. And so leapt into the world of, entrepreneurship and self-employment. And for the last 2 years, we've grown a small team of us who work on Word Made Digital projects. That's what it's called, Word Made Digital. And it's the podcast and TV. And so we create content like tutorial videos and podcast content, and I speak at events or conferences, workshops. And the other side, we do consulting. So helping others communicate church strategy for communications and digital discipleship, and how do you do social media, and what the heck is TikTok, and podcasting is often what people ask me about, because mine has done fairly well over the last few years, and all that kind of stuff. So there's that's where I live now, in that world. And I'm learning the business side of it, but because you enter entrepreneurship usually with a skill set, and then learning about how to do business is like a whole other skill set. And so I'm come in with a communication skill set, and now I'm learning about like taxes and cash flow statements and HR policies. So
the exciting
everything's
things,
illegal. Yeah. All of that stuff. So the end of that is, what I love about this is that what I did in maybe just one church community full time, I now am able to do for many other churches, and where I felt like we'd grown so much over 9 years in that one church at Sanctus Church. It was called C4 when I was working there with John Thompson, who's been on this podcast. We'd done so much, but there were so many other churches that had need, and there's so many other Christian organizations that had need. that like, what if I could give the parts that I'm best at, to more people. And so that's what we've been trying to do for the last few years. So that's
Yeah,
the
that's
story.
amazing. That's so good. I love especially, that there's that definitive moment for you when you start to see so many things, so many projects that you're a part of, and like you say, it's just too much.
Mm,
Um, you feel like maybe God is calling you to do something, like you've just said, that really reaches many different organizations. Um, I can only imagine that there's people listening right now who are in a job doing something and they feel like God is calling them to something more.
yeah.
What's it like to kind of make that shift? Like, what kind of, were you like praying for a sign from God to be like, okay, I got to do this thing? Because it's a huge risk. Like you say, you got to learn on the job. Like, what was that time like for you to make
Yeah.
that transition?
Mm. Well, I didn't make it quick. Okay, on a very practical level, I didn't make it quickly. I
Yeah.
built it on the side, and um I probably wanted or dreamed of doing it before I was ready to do it. I don't mean like I was making chess moves and strategically like, how do I get out of this terrible job? It was nothing like that. It
Yeah.
was more like it was a dream, but I wasn't sure how. I didn't know all the steps, so it was
Mm.
sort of a slow process on the side. And then when I did leave my church job to do this, it was the right time because I had a little bit of a network or a little bit of trust, broader than my own little community, that
Mm.
allowed some people to want to work with me without me like cold calling 100 churches. There were a
Yeah.
few who could you could start with, and then it's kind of continued from there. But it was oh my goodness, there were like, I cried. It was scary. It's
Yeah.
scary. It still is
Yeah.
scary some days. But
Mhm.
one of the things that the Lord said too, this is like me coming into a time where my I used to have like every 2 weeks I got a salary, like I got paid, it came into my bank account. And now um it's up and down. Like
Yeah.
there are great months and not so great months in terms of like money coming, cash flow. That's what your cash flow state things I'm learning about. Like the money comes in different
Yeah.
rhythms or no rhythm at all, really, for the most part. And so not everyone is built for that.
Yeah.
And it's okay. I think like the hustle culture, like social media talks all the time about all these entrepreneurs and hashtag side hustle or whatever. It's not for everybody.
Mm.
Some people aren't in a life position, or like if you've got
No.
a family to feed, you need health insurance for a major illness in your family, or like it's not for everybody. But if you are wanting to do it, the thing I really felt like the Lord said to me was that image out of Peter walking on water,
Mm.
where like, if so for me, the waves were like, money's coming, money's going, there's no money this month, there's a lot of money next month. That like my value, my security, my hope would not be in those waves
Mm.
of up and down of the financial side, or did I get the job, or did the client like it, or, all
Yeah.
that. But that my focus would be on Jesus, what he'd asked me to do, and I would like step out. And
Yeah.
so that basically, I remember thinking in those early days, I felt like Jesus kind of said like, look at me, don't look at the waves, because you're going to be like nauseous, like
Mm.
this is like an up and down roller coaster.
Yeah.
Don't look at it, and you're going to have like no joy if that's what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Like, look at me, remember I'm the one who asked you to do it, or I felt that he was, and like,
Yeah.
step out, look at me, don't worry about all that stuff, we got that worked, we'll work that out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
such a good test of, like motivation, underlying motivation to be able to say, like, are my eyes fixed on Jesus, or are they fixed
Yeah.
on cash flow? If it's fixed on cash flow, we're going to be sinking. If it's
Yeah.
fixed on like that
Or
sort
the
of level of,
opposite.
yeah,
Like if you're doing really well, then you can become so prideful and
exactly.
forget who gave it to you in the first place. It
Yeah.
comes both ways for me. There's some great months.
Mm.
And then if I'm looking at the money and not at Jesus, like if I'm looking at those
Yeah.
stupid cash flows, the waves, if they're up or down,
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad, both can mess you up.
For
Mm.
And
sure.
so, like, why did we start? Look at
Yeah.
Jesus. That's sort
Yeah.
of what I've been trying to do. Some days better than others.
So good.
I think isn't
Thank you.
it Keller that says when our identity is in what we do, success goes to our heads and failure goes to our hearts.
Yeah,
Mm.
So
that's good.
yeah,
Yeah, that's it. That's
Tim
it.
Keller,
Yeah.
not me. I
Leave
wish.
it to Tim Keller. Basically, who needs us? You know what? Let's just quote Tim Keller for the next
Exactly.
half
Yes,
hour.
there you go. That's
Start a
all you need.
podcast reading Tim Keller
Yeah.
quotes.
Well, hey, as a creative, Joanna, I mean, there's people listening to this who realize what they're passionate about doing as a creative didn't even exist like 10, 20, 25 years ago. And I think, historically, people would look at ambition for seeing God's kingdom advanced and kind of put it in a category of like, well, maybe you'll be a preacher, teacher person.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll write a book, or maybe you'll go be a missionary. And it was like, there you go, and then in the 80s and 90s, there's some evolution in things, like you see a lot more energy being put into like worship ministry or like sports ministry or like college campus ministries, which is awesome. But what's, I think, really exciting is that we're living really on the threshold of an era where there is so many creative ways to engage with people and invite them to discover Jesus in deeper, richer ways. The challenge with that, though, is that for some people, whether it's millennials or Gen Z, we're kind of in uncharted territory. You can't look back and say, well, in the 70s, our church did this with TikTok, right? Like, it didn't even exist. So as a creative, right? Like, how do you see that gifting, especially in communications? How do you see using that gifting just to invite people to experience Jesus in deeper and richer ways?
Yeah, how to use the gift. Well, I think maybe some of it is in the hint of what I said earlier of like, the job didn't exist. I kind of made the job.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't like some sneaky, like, well, I'm going to do it for free. And if they don't pay me, like, then I'm leaving. Like, it wasn't like that. It was love. Like that was a love or a passion project that developed into a job in that church. And so I think at some point, like, it's that Corinthians, right? If I do all these wonderful things and I have not love, I'm nothing. If I know how to talk well or do spoken word on Instagram and YouTube and I'm not loving, like, it's just a clang. It's like this annoying, obnoxious sound. And I think that a lot of stuff out there that Christians and others create is kind of annoying and obnoxious because I think we lack the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I hope I got them all. But if that comes out of us, is the fruit of how we create, and we do it from that kind of a place. And we're never perfect. We're all imperfect, but if we're coming from that kind of a posture, I think that we can create things that bring life. And then actually, I think in our culture, it's not true everywhere, but in the context where we live, it seems like there are jobs that start to appear because of that. And that's a privilege we have as a wealthier nation. There's lots of places in the world that no pastor gets paid anything at all. It's the side thing they do after they worked 12 hours that day, So I know it's sort of a privileged position to say it, but it is the truth in our context that there are Christian organizations that have money. And so if they see you're an artist, a painter, a musician, a creative, a designer, a web builder, I don't know, a writer, and you're doing it from a place that's the fruit feels like more Jesus, fruit of the Spirit, right? Like it shows that in your work, then I don't know, it seems like there is work for people. People like me hire those people now, and churches hire those people, and others want to come alongside and sponsor your work. So keep doing it. And if we do it from a place of love, I think it looks different than the world. And I think there are Christians who are able to fund it.
Yeah, that's great. So we're kind of like talking about that in any sphere of life, no matter what gift or skill that God has given us, we can apply that, work hard, and that will in some way grow the kingdom. Are there some like biblical characters or like roles within scripture that you would point to say that like this person is an inspiration to me? Like when I look at them, I can see that they are sort of doing this, they're kind of doing this entrepreneurial thing in scripture. They're innovating in a way that's never been done before. They're serving God in a way that's different than sort of the status quo.
Yeah. Well, there's so many examples. I think this is an interesting question. But the two that stand out to me most at this moment, I would highlight Paul, the Apostle Paul, who, after a radical transformation, so I talk about, if I do workshops and stuff, I talk a lot about how the Roman road system that was built to conquer and to bring capital, their version of capitalism, and conquer people all around. They built this technology to move their military around. It also meant that communication could be moved around. So for the first time ever, you could get, literally, the good news of Jesus could move to the world because there were road systems, a
Yeah.
technology. We don't think of roads as technology, but it was a system that allowed the word to spread. And so the fast forward to that is we're on this the digital highway, or whatever lame word you want to use for it. Paul used it in his day, and it's an inspiration for how we could use it today. He was innovating, he was using the access he had. And then further to that, I often think of Paul as kind of like the first megachurch pastor, because he was like the lead teacher and theologian guy, brilliant mind, who wrote letters or sermons or teachings, however you want to. He wrote these letters that were full of teaching and theology, and they were sent out to all the local sites or the local campuses of his church. He was sort of the head guy, and there's pros and cons to the megachurch model or the multi-site church model, but in some ways it's kind of what he was doing. He was using the comms technology they had, which is letter writing sent through Roman systems of roads, to get this stuff to people everywhere.
Yeah.
And then those letters were spread and passed. The other person that comes to mind is someone who I always am moved by. I particularly, if you've seen the Chosen video series, I think they do a great job of telling the story of the woman at the well, who, after this encounter with Jesus, who knows everything about her, she says, like, he knows everything I've ever done, and he loves me. Is basically the point of what she's saying. And she's sort of this inspiration to me because she's so, like, I mean, when you really think about the kind of person she would have been, she's so unlikely and kind of offensive to all of us religious people in terms of who she would be and what she represents. And she's the one who's like going around, beginning a movement of Jesus, or an entrepreneur, so an entrepreneur of some kind, like in her town, and trying to start something new, a new movement, a new way of thinking. And she's right. We have the guy who was murdering Christians, and this woman who had like a very questionable history in her life of mistakes and abuse and all kinds of things. And these are the people. And so I don't know. I feel like we should probably look for more people like that and what they're trying to do, and pay less attention to people like me.
That is so helpful, though, just to think of the people who Jesus chooses to really like push his kingdom forward, that God would choose people, even like you and I, and people like the woman at the well. And really humbling to think of how significant those people were for the sake of the kingdom. And for those listening, as they think about themselves, to be able to say, God has given me gifts, God has given me an opportunity, he sees fit that he would use me for the sake of his kingdom. I think that's incredible. Thank you.
So to maybe to dial in a little bit more specifically in the kind of the digital communications realm, say there's a listener who's checking out this episode right now and kind of saying, like, okay, I'd love to do something. I'd love for my story to be like one of those people who maybe, despite bad choices or mistakes in my past, like meets Jesus and is inspired and changed by that relationship to then really purposefully step forward and say, I want people's lives to be impacted by the same gospel message that has shaped and transformed me. And so they're left saying, okay, but where do I start? What do I put my hand to? What's some really practical steps I can take? And so I wonder, given your work and your insights, Joanna, what would you say? Yeah, these are some of the primary ways that Jesus followers are working innovatively to use, whether it's communication strategies, digital media, maybe creative projects, to really engage with the broader culture for the sake of the gospel, wanting to be agents of redemption in the world. What would you point people to as really awesome strategies for that?
There's so many things going on, and in the same way that, like, we talk about how in the old days everyone would come on Thursday nights at 7 o'clock or 8, you had to watch the show, and if you missed it, you missed it, or
Mm.
maybe you had a VCR or something. So we all were watching very, very few channels of media. And now it's so spread out and diverse, and there's pros and cons to that. In the same way, I think that's happening in church. Like, what's going on? Well, I think there's so many things going on in so many different directions, and because there's so many platforms and tools now to use, and even just the phones we have. I heard that the phones we have in our hands have better, stronger, smarter computers than the thing that took man to the moon.
Yeah.
Like,
I
it's
believe it.
wild. Like, we have so much power in our pocket,
Yeah.
and so it's being used in all kinds of interesting ways. Like I mentioned, like, one of the things I would say is a thread to pull on for people, if they want to follow curiosity, is there a country of the world you're kind of interested in from a Christian perspective? Like, try and find out and maybe you can contact someone you may even know there, like, what are they doing
Mm.
to reach people? Because I think as we go increasingly post-Christian, we want to look to other countries. What are they doing?
Mm.
What's working in India? Well, there they have this interesting approach with WhatsApp, which is this ubiquitous tool in play. Actually, in Canada and the US, it's not as used as it is in most other countries of the world. It's a huge app in so many other places, but they're starting, like, I guess people who are more rigorous WhatsApp users join groups and discussion groups based on like-mindedness. And so,
Wow.
for example, they'll have a book study, or like, we might do like an alpha series. They might have like a questions about God and faith group, and then people join and are having discussions or having video chats, meeting new friends. Apparently romantic relationships happen now. They're meeting each other through WhatsApp. I don't really understand how it all works, because
Yeah.
I'm a basic user of WhatsApp, but it's interesting to see what a country that has way more people, so then way
Yeah.
more opportunity, but also more challenge, what are they using? So that's one, silly example. But things like, I think, whatever our theology is, it's interesting to look at, like, a Judah Smith with Church Home. He started Church Home as like, and basically like an app-based church community that you join with
Yeah.
teaching and worship and small groups and all that kind of stuff. But it's like through your phone.
Mhm.
And so there's some questions and concerns I think we should have about what that means. Life on life, life to life, eating together. How do we baptize someone on the internet? There's some big questions, but we can look at it and not just be critical, but be curious and say, like, what is working there and what is attracting people there? Why does Justin Bieber talk about this all the time on his Instagram? It's impacting people, and it feels like maybe more approachable than a lot of our churches, in terms of digital natives, under 40-year-olds who would be quite comfortable checking something out online that they may not want to do in person. Oh my goodness. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many interesting things going on in the world. One thing I'll mention that, Luke, you and I have been involved in, it's just like it's nothing glamorous, but a very simple thing is, like, we started these prayer sessions on Zoom where people from all around the world join once a month. And we start 30 minutes together, and we do some sort of prayer exercises, or we might have a contemplative video where we engage. We break out into discussion groups to pray for one another and say, what are you hoping to hear from today? Then we go for 2 hours on our own. We give everyone a guidebook, choose your own adventure, all kinds of tools and resources to pray on your own, silently, or just to have some prayer and solitude with the Lord, or do a creative drawing exercise, or go on a nature walk and have some questions to bring along the way. And then we come back for the last 30 minutes, and maybe we'll take communion together, or we'll do some interesting reflective exercises every month is a little bit different. But the point is, that's like a zero, not zero cost, it's a low cost way to get people together to pray, to put something on. And the magic, there's no magic. I guess if there's magic, it's just like when you put something on your calendar, you're more likely to do it. And so when we put this monthly time on the calendar, it means we're more likely to show up and do the prayer thing we said we wanted to do in the first place. So that's like it's high tech in that we're using Zoom, but it's like low cost, low tech, really, in terms of most things. And then we're, gathering to then go away and do prayer and solitude on our own. It's been amazing to see, like, a breakout room will end up being like, for example, I don't know, a group of 4 moms who are all struggling with prodigal children, and they just happen to find the group together, and now they're all praying for one another. Or another group where a bunch of people all had a similar scripture or image given to them in their time by themselves, and they're like, whoa, like what's going on, like why did we all get this? I know there's been some really cool stories that have come out of it, but that's what I mean by a lot of the stories are so small that we don't get to hear them. And that's just one that I'm involved in that has been rich for my own life. So there are lots of ways. I mean, just I also, one more thing I'll mention is the Chosen video series. They crowdfunded this video series that I will say I avoided watching for a long time because I thought it was going to be another lame Christian video thing. And everyone I've told about it has felt the same way. And they didn't listen to me when I said it's so good, you should watch it. And people are like, oh man, it's going to be another lame Christian video about Jesus. It's not. It's actually well done. And it is like binge worthy content, but it's telling the backstories of all the disciples. And if people aren't watching it yet, they should go find it. There's 2 seasons out, and just an innovative way to try and reach people through the thing we all love, which is like a Netflix style video. And I've been personally quite moved by watching those shows. I don't know if you guys have seen them, but
I've been holding out, but you might have convinced me.
they're not lame. They're not lame. You should watch them. And I've been really moved by some of these episodes. Just see Jesus in a different way than I'd seen him before. So
that's great.
That's powerful.
Yeah. Now, this is a bit of a confession time for me. I'm dangerously close to becoming an absolute Luddite. I'm a little like not afraid of technology, but I'm definitely aware of the uses of technology. And I'm maybe developing something of a conspiracy theory about how technology is like our modern way of like eat and be like God, you know, like our desire to be like all wise or something. And then we
and omniscient in all places at all
horrible
times.
paragraphs on Facebook. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the relationship to technology that many of us have experienced is one that is very me focused. It's very individualistic. It's very presenting ourselves in a certain way, to have people think of us as though we're like these perfect beings who have no flaws. And we try to push forward our own agendas, our own accomplishments, and raise our social standing. What are some of the ways that we can actually use social media for good? Like I struggle with this as a pastor. Like, how can I actually use social media, not just to like put forward my own agenda, but actually point people towards the greatness of God?
Yeah. Well, in the words of an older brother of mine, who is from like, we're 12 years apart. And so he comes from like a different technology generation than me. And I've been thinking a lot about what he said to me this summer. He's a missionary, lives abroad in an unnamed country. And so he has a bit of a different perspective on things. And, you know, he just kind of said, you know what, like, and this is a guy who like loves Jesus, is thoughtful, educated on these issues, you know, wants to reach people, blah, blah, blah. And he's not on these social media, partly because of safety issues for his family, but he's also just saying, you know, like, I just don't think everyone needs to say stuff. Like, I just think like, just because I think we've forgotten that in the old days, we had this mediation where there was some, for better and for worse, there was a group that made decisions about who got a voice. Sure. And some of that meant that voices were missed or were silenced, literally oppressed. But also it meant that there was a filter. And right now with this literally hashtag no filter, there's it means everyone can say whatever they want, and not everyone needs to say things. So as much as I'm an advocate for this, because it is what I feel like I'm supposed to do, I feel the tension of that. And Matt, if you feel a conviction to not be on them, or for anyone listening, you know, like, then get off, because not everyone needs to say stuff. Not everyone has to have some pedestal. We can have great influence in our local communities
Mm.
and the people around us without having to posture ourselves in this way. But if we are going to show up in these places, Nora Jones, who's like a speaker, author, she's like the Facebook person for religion.
Mhm.
I'm butchering, she has a fancy title, but the point is she's works for Facebook, helping them figure out what to do with Christians and faith-based groups on Facebook
wow.
or on Instagram and all this kind of stuff. And she talks about social leadership. Not so, if you're going to be on social media, be a social leader. And it's thinking around like, what do we need in a leader? We need someone who cares about the needs of others, who like, well, I mean, at the base of it, it's thinking of other people before yourself and how can you serve them. That's what real leadership is. How do we humble ourselves in order to help others? And so asking more questions than we answer, being thoughtful about the kinds of stuff we post, not sharing, not oversharing, but are there ways we can share things that we're struggling with or are going through? Again, we need wisdom there about what is right to share when. But if all we share is everything is awesome all the time, it discourages other people, because everything isn't awesome all the time for everybody. It's the classic line, we see everybody's highlight reel and we're judging it against our behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But we all have that behind the scenes. And if there are places we can appropriately share questions, struggle, things that we might need someone to pray for, I think it makes us a little bit more safe or relatable, easy to connect with as a leader. And I think here's just like a really, really practical thing that I haven't done in a long time. But when I worked in the church, something I loved to do was I would post on social, I'm going to be, and again, it's COVID. So there's some, whatever the form is this can take, I don't know. But it was, the gist of it was like, hey, everybody, church community, and not even just church community. Hey, everybody who lives here. Like, I have lots of friends who aren't in the church. I'm going to be at Starbucks at this location between this and this time.
That's
and
cool.
would love to connect. And if you come, stay for 5 minutes, stay for the whole time, do whatever you like. And so I would bring my laptop, because like then I'm not like staring around a room being creepy. I'd bring my work. And if no one came, I would just like do my work. Like it would be on a day I could do my emails or whatever admin stuff I needed to get done that worked in that environment. But usually people would come, and
Yeah.
sometimes it would just be like they stop for 5 minutes. They're like, I saw you were here, so I thought I'm going to come get a coffee and say hi. And they'd stop for 5 or just 10 minutes. And others would come and sit and stay a while, and we'd end up in like an interesting or hopefully a prayerful conversation. So using the digital to move people into the physical
Right.
connection. The last thing I'll say about that is
Yeah.
think about these apps like dating apps. Matt, I think you're married. Luke, I know you guys are married, kids on the way, kids here. So, but if you've ever been on a dating, where you can imagine what they are, the point of a dating app, there are these digital tools that the point is to meet in person. The
Right.
point is to actually have a real connection with someone.
Yeah.
But they start online, and you're going to meet someone and connect with someone that you've like never would have probably ever had the other opportunity to meet. So social media in the same way can introduce people to Jesus or introduce people to a local church community in a way that they never would have had access to before.
Yeah.
But if that's all it is, it becomes like this weird, creepy, toxic thing. We need to also meet in person. That's the point. And even if you're in a relationship like you guys and your wives, your friends, I'm sure you're texting, emailing, FaceTime, you're using digital tools to connect with your loved ones all the time. But it's because you're doing that in between times you meet in person. It's like, it might just be like, hey, get milk on your way home, or it might be, a FaceTime with grandma across the country, but both can be useful or meaningful. But the hope is that you're going to get together in person.
Those are like wildly helpful to me personally, to just think through that, instead of trying to make ourselves like omnipresent, like we're everywhere at all times, we know everything that's going on. If we can find out more details about what's happening and who knows where, maybe I'll be less anxious. Or if I write a gigantic post and show everybody how wise I am, I love the idea of pointing towards our limitations in saying like, here's some things that I'm struggling with or that I'm thinking about that I'm not too sure about. Showing limit, I think, is so helpful. And then also like so wise, I think, to say like, here's where I'm gonna be, to like physically locate yourself and invite people into that space is like such a cool use of technology that could be used otherwise for harmful means. So no, that's really helpful for me.
And
Thank you.
everybody loves Starbucks, so it's a win. It's a win all around.
Yeah. Well, and if you can, I don't know, if COVID rules, like it doesn't have to be like it's outside. It's
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the park beside the Starbucks. I don't know, whatever it is, but and if you,
Sky's the
I don't know
limit.
if there's church budget, like the church might, you know, might buy everybody a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I don't mean a fancy coffee. I mean like a Pike Place blend, you know, the cheap coffee, you know, whatever people can afford. But I found that every time I did it, I was glad I did it, and people came. Even if it was just like 5 or 10 minutes, that was like a meaningful connection with a parishioner or whatever you call them, a person in the congregation, who like you don't just see now on Sundays, like you saw them at coffee. And I think it builds trust, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes.
Well said.
I love it.
Well said.
Yeah.
So people are listening in, and maybe there's some listeners who are like, okay, I love that on a personal level, and I'm thinking about my church, or maybe I have responsibilities in my church that have just emerged during the pandemic for how to best utilize our online platform. Like we've gone from like no live stream to like a live stream every Sunday.
Yeah.
We're ramping things up on social media. But if we're honest, maybe the extent of our content is kind of like, here's a service, here's a post reminding you that a service is coming. Oh, here's another service. Here's a post reminding you that a service is coming. So how can churches maybe get outside of that? Like,
why does anyone follow that account? It sounds terrible.
And how can churches more creatively think about, hey, how can we utilize our online platforms to really make these digital disciples, to inject valuable, life-giving content into people's lives, both in our local setting, but even around the world? Because if you got internet, anyone with internet can discover you.
Yeah. Okay, again, another big topic that probably could be like a whole other hour. So I'll just leave this one idea or thought, because ultimately I think discipleship does work best like eyeball to eyeball or shoulder to shoulder. Usually the most, you know, Jesus said, come and see. Jesus said, like, come follow me, like literally walk and hang out with me, eat with me, do life with me, be in proximity to me. There's some limits to that online. I think there are some things that are possible though. But if we could use just the smaller category of discipleship to do with like what Jesus did was teach. One of the things I think we most need as disciples for our local church to do is be a curator of content for us. There are so many things out there. You want to talk about any issue in the Bible, or like, does God exist? Is the Bible trustworthy? To what the heck's the deal with the book of Revelation? Like, and you know, how do we do marriage and family and kids and, you know, money and all these questions? You know, something that can make a pastor insecure is the fact that we have access to all the best teaching, all the brilliant people, all the best communicators in the world. We can find them on the internet. And so at one level, I think that if we feel like we're constantly comparing ourselves to that as a teacher, as a pastor, preacher, leader, I mean, oh my gosh, like that's just, you're never going to win that game. We're never going to be as good as insert favorite communicator. We talked about Tim Keller. Like he's this brilliant mind and we'll never be as smart as him. Not going to try, but we can best curate content for the needs of our local community, including a Tim Keller series. Like if you're doing a series on marriage and you know that Tim Keller is a genius, he wrote a book on this stuff, but if you don't agree with him, find whoever it is that you like. But I mean, again, curate for your theology, for the kind of church that you have, and offer resources to your people, because we need help navigating this world. There's so much out there, and we can be discipled down the wrong path through like these YouTube binges that have led to fear, anger, conspiracy theory, division, you know, and you know, every local church will have some theological leaning. And so we can even say, if we're posting things to our people, there will be things that maybe there are things we like about this and things we maybe don't agree with as much, but the overarching thing is, this would be helpful tool for you on this topic of money or marriage or revelation or whatever. We need curators. That would be like one very simple thing that the local church would, if they're doing a series on something or they're teaching on something, who are the things that helped you prepare for the message? Offer that as like links and tools and resources to people, because we're going to ask questions, but wouldn't we rather have people come to resources that are helpful and not dangerous? I think a lot of people are reading and listening to like really dangerous stuff, and dangerous as in it could lead them to like in some cases it like leads people to take up arms against, there's a guy in Toronto. It's a totally like non-religious thing. He a couple of years ago, he was angry at women and he was part of some subgroup, and they took a car and or a truck and drove down this young street in Toronto and killed all these people because he just like was angry that women wouldn't date him or something. I'm simplifying a much larger issue, but he found a group of people on the internet who spurred him on in this kind of feeling, and it's like seeded and like they watered the hatred and anger within him. And so there's some really dangerous stuff that can happen through those relationships online. So what if we helped curate the opposite? Help our people through if our expertise in the church is in theology and thinking around the life of Jesus, then like how can we bring that expertise to people through a curated list of the best content that we find on the internet, so that people will find whatever they want, but if they want to listen to a trusted leader and a trusted voice, their local pastor, this is the best stuff on that topic.
That's great, because like our people are longing for truth. Our people are like spending apparently hours just digging into the darkest recesses of the internet. I remember when I was like 18, I got really into Nephilim making the pyramids. I wasn't about it, but I was just like in the YouTube deep dive stuff. And I needed somebody to fill my time with something good and honorable. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what you're really calling us to, is to say, your people want to learn something of use, of benefit, something that is true and something that is good, something that is right. And
well, and then within that, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking more and more, like I was speaking at a church on Sunday about this, and somebody asked, how do we know, what to trust on the internet? It feels like stuff's being censored, do we get the truth? And I think then maybe in the reality of our lives today, I do think part of our discipleship, if we're going to be a leader in the church, we have to disciple people into truth. And that truth includes the internet. There are a lot of lies and a lot of crazy things out there. And we should educate ourselves, if we're a leader, on how to discern that, so that we can help others discern it. Because if we get led astray by something that looks legit on the internet and is really not, we lead others with us. So that if we're about truth, then we should know how to find it and then how to point others to it.
I love that. Don't be formed to the patterns of the world. Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you. This has been great. Thank you so much. Why don't you tell us where people can learn more about your work? You already mentioned that you have a podcast. Do you want to give us some details about how people can find more about you?
Yes. The easiest thing, I am on all the platforms at Joanna la Fleur. So if you want to find me on somewhere, you'll find me at Joanna la Fleur. And we'remadedigital.com is where you're going to find things like, I have a podcast. We're now season 7 of the podcast. So we've interviewed all the smart people like John Mark Comer, who hates social media and, we should all put our phones away, and a John Tyson. And we've had a Priscilla Shire, Danielle Strickland. I don't know. it's 7 seasons now of the show. So we've had lots and lots of smart people. We try to diversify the audience, the voices in terms of gender and ethnic diversity. We're trying more and more to go we're trying to be more international in the next round of podcasts, because
cool.
there's some smart voices around the world we need to listen to. And tutorial, if you're doing church communications or you're a leader overseeing someone who does that, we have dozens now tutorials, video tutorials on how to do, like stuff like how to use Instagram if you're a church, or like if you're building a new website, like what website platform do you choose, or like very, very practical things. Or like someone's quit your staff, how do you communicate that to your staff, to your community? So very, very practical things for communication of a church or a charity. Those are videos. And the last thing I will plug is we have a Facebook group. It's called Digital Church. If you go on Facebook and find Facebook groups, it's a discussion. There's 800 or 900 people in it. Right now, we want it to grow, and we want people who care about digital church to join. And we're talking about discipleship and evangelism in this digital context, and what's going on in like the tech world, and what's going on with the latest upgrade for TikTok. And we're having banter about how do you disciple people on the internet and all that kind of stuff.
I love it. So cool.
Awesome. Well, Joanna, thank you so much for your time. And I know I've learned a ton. I'm sure our listeners will as well. But thank you for everything you shared with us.